We're going to talk to you about the most urgent thing that is on our mind, and what we suspect is the most urgent thing on the minds of those who will connect with us. We'll title this tape, Planet Earth About to be Recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
The early life of Marshall Applewhite. Marshall Applewhite, leader of the Heaven's Gate cult, became a tragic symbol of blind devotion and charismatic leadership. His journey began in Spur, Texas, where he was born on May 17, 1931, to a Presbyterian minister. Growing up in a religious household and frequently moving, Applewhite felt isolated and struggled with forming connections. The fateful meeting of Barney Nettles and Marshall Applewhite, the birth of Heaven's Gate. In the early 1970s, two individuals at a crossroads in their lives met, and their union would ignite one of the most infamous spiritual movements in history, Heaven's Gate. But how did the meeting of Barney Nettles and Marshall Applewhite create a belief system that would claim the lives of 39 followers? By 1972, Applewhite was deeply lost. He struggled with his upbringing, sexuality, and personal identity. Despite his academic and musical efforts, nothing provided peace. Alienated from society and unable to reconcile his inner turmoil, he sought a way out. Barney Nettles, a nurse and mother, was also on a spiritual quest. Disillusioned with conventional religion, she sought answers in Eastern philosophies, mysticism, and the occult. She believed a divine extraterrestrial force would reveal a higher truth. In 1972, Applewhite and Nettles met at a spiritual gathering in Houston. Their shared quest for truth connected them instantly. Applewhite, struck by Nettles' self-assurance, found a kindred spirit, and together they envisioned a spiritual mission transcending earthly existence. Their connection was immediate, forming the foundation for a radical spiritual journey. Applewhite, drawn to Nettles' ideas, began to shed his former life, while Nettles saw in him a partner to help refine her vision of divine transformation. Together, they developed a belief system blending Christianity, mysticism, and extraterrestrial ideas. They believed Earth was merely a temporary stop, with ultimate salvation awaiting in the cosmos. Their message began to resonate with a small group of followers. Life inside Heaven's Gate, the making of true believers. In the mid-1970s, a small group of individuals began to gather around Marshall Applewhite and Barney Nettles, two individuals with a vision to lead them beyond the physical confines of Earth and into a higher existence, what they called the next level. Over the years, their belief system grew, and what began as a handful of seekers transformed into one of the most infamous cults in modern history, Heaven's Gate. But what was life like inside Heaven's Gate? What made people so willing to devote themselves to Applewhite's message? And how did the cult manage to make true believers out of its followers, leading them down a path that would ultimately result in one of the most tragic cult suicides in history? The teachings of Heaven's Gate were founded on the idea that Earth was a temporary home, a school, for souls who were preparing to ascend to a higher, more advanced level of existence. Applewhite and Nettles made it clear to their followers, only by leaving behind earthly attachments and rejecting human desires could they prepare for the ultimate transformation. The next level was a higher realm, a place that Applewhite described as a utopia for those who could transcend human limitations. He portrayed this ascension as a scientific process, one that involved a complete shedding of one's earthly identity and the rejection of the physical form. Followers were told they were human vehicles, whose souls were ready for advancement to a superior extraterrestrial existence. In the early days, the group was small, just a handful of devoted individuals who sought a deeper connection to the divine, and who, like Applewhite himself, were struggling to make sense of their place in the world. Applewhite's charisma, paired with his vision of salvation, began to create a powerful sense of purpose and unity among them. Life inside Heaven's Gate was regimented and structured. The group wore identical clothing, black pants, matching t-shirts and sneakers, all designed to strip away individual identity and create a sense of unity. There were no distinguishing features, no personal expression. Members shaved their heads and adhered to strict guidelines, both spiritual and personal. The group adhered to a highly disciplined routine. Members spent much of their time in meditation, studying the teachings of Applewhite and Nettles. The group engaged in intense spiritual exercises designed to foster unity, self-discipline, and obedience. The goal was to prepare for the next level by rejecting all aspects of their previous lives, including relationships, attachments, and even their names. Members were no longer individuals. They were students or crew members of the next level, and the world outside of the group was a distraction, a source of temptation that could impede their progress. Applewhite and Nettles instilled the belief that earthly desires, family, career, sexuality, were lower, energies that had no place in the world of the next level. Applewhite's teachings were designed to gradually dismantle the personal identities of his followers, replacing their previous sense of self with the collective identity of the group. Through strict discipline, spiritual exercises, and the rejection of individual will, followers were slowly transformed into true believers, committed to the mission of transcending human existence and ascending to the next level. Applewhite also played a critical role in shaping the belief system. His authority was absolute, and his followers came to see him as the sole guide to salvation. He presented himself as the two in the Bible's book of Revelation, the representative of the divine who would lead them to eternal life beyond earth. Barney Nettles, who was his partner in this mission, played an equally important role, but it was Applewhite who served as the central figure. One of the core elements of Heaven's Gate was the idea of graduation to the next level. This concept was central to the transformation process. It was not just about leaving behind earthly things, but about preparing for a higher form of existence, becoming one with an advanced, alien civilization that would reward their devotion and sacrifice. Life inside Heaven's Gate was isolated from the outside world. Applewhite and Nettles emphasized the importance of separating from anything that could distract members from their mission, family, friends, and even personal desires. Followers cut off contact with their loved ones and left behind their old lives, fully committing themselves to the group and the belief system. Heaven's Gate was not just a religious movement, it was a way of life. The group lived in self-contained communities, working together to sustain themselves, share responsibilities, and continue their spiritual training. Everything was done with the sole focus of preparing for the moment when they would leave Earth behind. In exchange for their unwavering devotion, Applewhite and Nettles promised their followers the ultimate reward, eternal life in the next level. It was a promise that gave followers an overwhelming sense of purpose, a belief that they were part of something bigger than themselves, part of a cosmic mission that would transcend the boundaries of life and death. The Hale-Bopp Comet and the final exit of Heaven's Gate. In 1997, the world witnessed a cosmic event that would become forever linked to one of the most tragic and mysterious cult suicides in modern history. The Hale-Bopp Comet, a spectacular sight visible to the naked eye, graced the skies in the spring of that year. To the members of Heaven's Gate, however, it was far more than a celestial body. It was a sign, a divine confirmation that their time had come to transcend earthly existence. For them, the comet was the final invitation to ascend to a higher level of existence, far beyond the physical limitations of the human body. The Hale-Bopp Comet was discovered in July 1995 and quickly became one of the most widely observed comets of the 20th century. Its enormous size and brilliant tail made it a breathtaking sight for millions around the world. However, for the members of Heaven's Gate, it was more than a spectacular celestial occurrence. It was a sign from the next level, confirming their belief that the time had arrived for their departure from Earth. Marshall Applewhite, the leader of the group, had long preached that the next level was just beyond the veil of human experience. He and his followers believed that Earth was a temporary school where souls were being tested before they could ascend to a higher existence, one far beyond the limitations of human form. The comet, with its brilliant glow and unmistakable trajectory, became the ultimate confirmation of their beliefs. In the months leading up to the comet's closest approach to Earth, the members of Heaven's Gate began to make preparations. They had been primed for years, conditioned to believe that their mission on Earth was nearing its end. Applewhite had told his followers that in order to ascend to the next level, they would need to shed their earthly bodies. The comet, they believed, was the signal that it was time for their exit. For the members of Heaven's Gate, exit was not a metaphor, it was a literal departure. They had long been told by Applewhite that the human body was merely a vehicle. one that needed to be abandoned to reach the higher, next level of existence. Their ultimate belief was that an extraterrestrial spacecraft was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet, waiting to transport them to their next phase of life. Applewhite told the members that they had to leave Earth behind in order to join the higher beings. The idea was that only those who were willing to transcend their physical forms would be taken aboard the ship. The process of ascension, as they believed, could only happen if they left their bodies behind, through death. The final days leading up to March 26, 1997, were marked by a meticulous and chilling preparation. Each member was required to prepare for the moment of their exit. The group dressed in identical black tracksuits, Nike sneakers, and purple shrouds, ensuring they all appeared uniform, even in death. Their heads were shaved, a symbol of shedding their earthly identities, and they took precautions to ensure their bodies were prepared for the final act. Applewhite and his followers were meticulous in their planning. They followed a detailed procedure, one that involved consuming a lethal mixture of phenobarbital and apple sauce, washing it down with vodka. They believed that this would release their souls from their physical forms, allowing them to ascend to the next level aboard the waiting spacecraft. On March 26, 1997, 39 members of Heaven's Gate, including Marshall Applewhite, carried out their final act. The members took the lethal mixture, laid down in their beds, and waited for death to release them from their human vessels. In their final moments, the followers of Heaven's Gate believed they were preparing for a journey to an extraterrestrial world, a place beyond human understanding, where they would be free from suffering, disease, and the limitations of the physical world. They believed they would be greeted by an alien spaceship waiting just behind the Hale-Bopp comet. When the bodies were discovered, the world was shocked. 39 individuals, men and women, had taken their own lives in the belief that they were transcending their earthly existence. The media rushed to cover the story, and the cult became infamous, its tragic end a grim reminder of the power of belief and the dangers of unquestioned devotion. The connection between the Hale-Bopp comet and Heaven's Gate was indelible. To many, the comet represented the final chapter in the story of a cult that believed it was about to ascend to a higher plane. But for others, the comet's appearance served as a chilling reminder of the dangers of extreme faith and blind devotion. What began as a search for truth and salvation ended in death, a death they believed would lead them to eternal life beyond Earth. The Hale-Bopp comet for them was not just a spectacular natural phenomenon. It was their final invitation to escape the human condition and join a cosmic, higher existence. The story of Heaven's Gate is a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human mind, the power of charismatic leadership, and the devastating consequences of absolute belief. As the Hale-Bopp comet receded into the night sky, it left behind a legacy of sorrow, unanswered questions, and a world forever changed by the tragedy of the final exit.